The wind howled through the Sierra ridges like a chorus of restless ghosts. Snow lashed at the mountainside, relentless and sharp, blanketing everything in a thick, blinding white. Trees bowed under the weight, their limbs creaking with age and storm. It was the kind of storm people in towns below spoke about with reverence, the kind that kept even seasoned mountaineers inside. But Lena Hart didn't have the luxury of staying in. Wrapped in a patched canvas coat, her father's old hunting, knife strapped to her belt, and a small axe slung over one shoulder, Lena pushed through the knee-deep snow with practiced grit. Her breath hung in the air like smoke, each exhale a silent prayer that she'd make it back before dusk. She had no time to worry about frostbite or exhaustion. The woodpile was down to its last few logs, and the stove inside her cabin could not burn hope alone. Lena had lived in the mountains for nearly 5 years, 5 long winters since her parents passed, leaving her their modest homestead and a collection of debts no one in town would help her pay. But she hadn't left. She couldn't. This place, with its unforgiving cold and jagged beauty, had become her battleground and her sanctuary. It shaped her, not into someone hard, but someone enduring. Someone who had learned to listen, to the wind, to the silence, and to the instincts that so often spoke louder than logic. As she descended toward the ridgeline, aiming for a cluster of fir trees she'd scouted days earlier, something pulled her to a stop. A sound. Not the groan of shifting branches or the distant howl of wolves, something human. A broken cry, barely audible beneath the wail of the wind. She turned her head, straining to hear through the storm. It came again, faint, ragged, desperate. Someone was out there. Lena didn't hesitate. She turned from the trail and followed. The voice, heart pounding, legs burning. The snow grew deeper and visibility shrank to mere feet. Her eyes scanned the blanketed ground, her breath coming hard and fast. And then she saw it. A dark shape, half buried under the snow at the base of a rocky outcrop. She rushed forward, fell to her knees, and brushed the snow away with trembling hands. It was a man, maybe mid-30s, his skin pale as the snow around him, lips tinged blue. His coat, clearly expensive, was torn and soaked through. One leg was twisted unnaturally beneath him, and blood had seeped into the snow in a quiet, ominous bloom. His eyes fluttered open at her touch, unfocused. His lips parted, but the sound that came out was barely more than a whisper. "Help. You're going to be all right," Lena said, though she wasn't sure if it was a promise or a command. She felt his pulse, weak but present. Her gaze darted to the forest, to the steep trail behind her, then back to the stranger. He was heavy, unconscious again, and she was alone. Still, she didn't think twice. She wrapped his arm around her shoulders, wedging herself beneath him, and began to drag him through the snow. Every step was a battle. Her boots slipped on ice. The wind bit at her exposed skin. But she kept moving, kept breathing, kept promising herself that if she could just get him to the cabin, she could keep him alive. By the time she reached the front door, Lena's body was on the verge of collapse. She kicked it open with her boot, stumbled inside, and lowered him onto the rug by the fire. Her hands were shaking, but her mind remained clear. She moved quickly, adding wood to the stove, stripping off his wet clothes layer by layer, wrapping him in blankets, heating water on the stove. His leg needed tending. She winced at the sight of the deep, jagged wound and cleaned it with warm cloths, biting her lip as she worked. She had no medical degree, just knowledge gathered from years of surviving, reading, and stubborn self-reliance. As the fire roared to life and the small room filled with warmth again, Lena watched the man's chest rise and fall, shallow but steady. She sat beside him, her hands raw and reddened, her muscles aching, but her thoughts refused to quiet. Who was he? He didn't look like someone who belonged in the mountains. His boots were high-end, the kind you'd see in glossy ads, not wilderness-tested. Gear. The watch she'd slipped from his wrist was worth more than her cabin. And yet he'd been alone. No gear, no supplies. Just a man left to die in a place that didn't offer second chances. She stayed up through the night, eyes drifting between the fire and his sleeping form, unable to sleep, unwilling to look away. Morning came slow and silver, light creeping across the frost-lined windows. Lena was dozing in the chair when she heard a sound, a cough. She snapped awake to see him shifting slightly, his brow furrowed in pain. He opened his eyes. "Where am I?" he croaked. "You're in my cabin," she said, standing slowly. "You were unconscious." I found you in the snow. He blinked, confusion flickering across his face. You saved me? Lena nodded. I didn't exactly have a choice. You were moaning like death itself. His cracked lips twitched, almost a smile. Charming. What's your name? She asked. He hesitated, eyes searching the ceiling as if the answer was hidden there. Noah, he said at last. Noah. Blake. The name stirred something distant in her memory, but she didn't press. Not yet. Well, Noah Blake, she said, walking to the stove and pouring him a cup of tea. You're lucky I was out there. Another hour and you'd be frozen. Stiff. He accepted the cup with shaky hands. I don't remember anything. How I got there. Why I was there. You don't have any ID, no phone, no wallet. He frowned. That's not right. I always carry them. His voice trailed off, worry now plain in his eyes. Lena met his gaze and felt a quiet knot form in her stomach. Someone had left him out there to die. And now he was here in her world. A man with a broken leg, a shattered memory, and secrets buried deep beneath the snow. Lena didn't know what it meant, but she knew one thing. She had pulled this stranger back from the edge of death, and whatever came next, she wouldn't turn away now. The days that followed unfolded slowly, stitched together by snow and silence. Lena was used to quiet. She had lived with it for years, and at some point it had become more of a companion than an absence. But this silence was different. It was filled with the subtle rhythms of recovery, the heavy breathing of a stranger. In pain, the soft rustle of blankets being shifted, and the occasional creak of the cabin as it settled beneath the weight of winter. Noah Blake remained on the old couch near the fire, his leg elevated and wrapped in layers of linen and herbs. Lena had done her best with what she had. Old remedies passed down from her mother, a few supplies scavenged from the local trading post weeks ago. He was healing slowly, but his condition was still fragile. His leg would need time. So would his memory. He asked questions at first. Simple ones. What day is it? How long have I been here? Where exactly are we? Lena answered them plainly. March. You've been here 3 days. And this, she said, motioning to the snow-covered forest outside the window. This is nowhere, which means no one comes looking unless they mean to. Noah would nod, but she could see the tension beneath his calm expression. The kind of tension that came from someone who wasn't used to helplessness. It was on the 4th day that he asked the question she'd been expecting. Do you think I was left there on purpose? Lena sat across from him, sharpening her blade, as she prepared to go out and check the traps. She didn't answer immediately. She didn't want to offer comfort if the truth was colder than the snow outside. You weren't dressed for survival, she said finally. You had no gear, no pack, no signal device, and you were lying at the bottom of a ridge like you'd been tossed there. Noah said nothing. Lena continued. People don't end up in these mountains by accident, especially not men wearing $1,000 watches and Italian leather boots. His gaze shifted to the fire, jaw tightening. I keep trying to remember, but everything comes in flashes. I see lights, an office, a man with a glass in his hand, then pain, cold. After that, just snow. You said your name is Noah Blake, she said. I asked around the radio dispatch. No hiker by that name was reported missing. No rescue alerts. Nothing. But I heard of your name before. On the radio, maybe. Business news. He looked up at her slowly. I think I'm someone important. Or I was. Why does that matter? She asked, folding her arms. Noah blinked. Because if I am, then someone tried to kill me. And I need to know why. Lena said nothing for a long time. She respected clarity. But this kind of uncertainty, the half-formed truths and broken timelines, made her wary. She didn't know this man, not really. And yet every time she looked at him, she saw more than just the sharp edges of a city life once lived. She saw a man disoriented by a betrayal he hadn't fully uncovered. That evening, while the fire crackled and snow fell steadily outside, Noah asked if he could help. You can barely walk, Lena replied. I can still write, he said, if you have paper. She retrieved an old leather-bound journal from a drawer and handed it to him without a word. It had once belonged to her father, though the pages were mostly blank. Noah opened it reverently, as if he were being trusted with something sacred. He began writing that night, not in neat paragraphs but in lists. Names, scenarios, partial memories. words that floated into his mind like echoes in a canyon. Lena would glance at him sometimes and catch him frozen mid-thought as if he were trying to summon the pieces of a life he couldn't quite reach. In the days that followed, they fell into a rhythm. Lena would wake early, tend the fire, check traps, bring in water from the stream. Noah would write or read by the fire. He asked questions about the land, about her life, about survival. She answered sparingly, but with surprising honesty. She told him about her parents, the accident that left her alone, the choice she made to stay when everyone else expected her to run. "This place saved me," she said one afternoon as they sat outside under the porch wrapped in wool blankets. "Not because it's kind, it isn't. It's cruel, brutal sometimes, but it's honest. And when everything in your life feels like a lie, that kind of truth can feel like salvation." Noah turned to her. "I don't think I've ever known a day that honest." She looked at him then, really looked. For the first time, his eyes seemed less guarded, his shoulders less burdened. The man who had once seemed so out of place in it, her world now looked like he was beginning to belong to it. That night, over a bowl of stew, he said, "I think I was supposed to close a deal. Something big. I remember a woman. Claire. She was on the board, I think. We were close once. But then she stopped returning my calls, started going behind my back." Lena stirred the stew slowly. "Go on." "There was another man. Jonathan. He was my assistant, but more than that. I trusted him. I remember drinking with him at the lodge near Fairbanks. He handed me a glass and said, 'By tomorrow the mine will be ours.' I thought it was a victory toast." He paused, eyes clouded. "But then I remember stumbling, heat rushing through my chest. My vision went black. After that, snow." Lena exhaled slowly. "So they drugged you." "They needed me out of the picture, just long enough to sign the deal without me. And they left you to die." Noah nodded, his jaw clenched. "But I didn't." He looked at her, and in his eyes was something fierce, something burning. "Because of you." Lena didn't reply, but something in her shifted. In that moment, she realized this man wasn't just trying to recover from a betrayal. He was trying to rebuild a sense of self in a world that had discarded him. He wasn't the man she found in the snow anymore. And maybe she wasn't the same woman either. The fire popped and crackled behind them, casting golden light across the worn wood of the cabin. Outside, the wind whispered against the window pane, a reminder of the cold they'd both come from. But here, in the warmth of flickering light and quiet truths, something unspoken began to take root between them. Neither of them said it aloud, but they both felt it. Something was beginning. The snow had begun to soften, melting into icy rivulets that trickled through cracks in the earth as if the mountain itself were beginning to exhale. Spring was still distant, but the bitter edge of winter had dulled, and with it came the sense that something was shifting. Not just in the land, but within Noah. Each morning, Lena watched him move through the cabin with a little more strength, the limp in his step slowly giving way to firmer footing. He still used the cane she had carved for him, more out of necessity than pride, but there was a quiet defiance in the way he held himself now. He no longer looked like a man recovering from trauma. He looked like someone beginning to remember who he was and why he mattered. But remembering came with consequences. Some days he wrote for hours in the leather journal, his handwriting sharper now, more confident. Other days he barely touched it. He would sit in silence, staring into the fire, lost in a war between grief and revelation. Lena didn't ask what he saw in those moments. She understood the silence of someone trying to reconcile who they used to be with who they might become. Then one afternoon, without warning, Noah stood in the middle of the room, journal in hand, and said, "I need to go back." Lena, sitting, cross-legged on the floor, stitching a tear in one of her coats, didn't look up. "Back where?" "To the life I left, to the people who tried to take it from me." His voice wasn't angry, but it held a quiet urgency. "I remember everything now. Jonathan drugged me. Claire knew. The signatures on the mining acquisition, mine included, were forged. They orchestrated everything while I was unconscious in the snow. When the board realized I was missing, Claire stepped in. The company is hers now. She took what I built and buried me to do it." Lena set her needle down and finally looked at him. "You think going back will fix that?" Noah met her eyes. I don't know, but I know I can't let them win. She rose to her feet slowly. And what if you go back and they make you into the man you used to be? He flinched at that but didn't retreat. I don't want to be that man again. Then be careful, she said, crossing her arms. Because the moment you walk back into that world, it'll try to remake you in its image. He nodded, stepping closer. Lena, I'm not walking away from this, or from you. I just need to make things right. Then I'll come back. She tilted her head, skeptical. People make promises all the time. The city teaches them how to forget. I won't forget, he said, his voice low. I won't forget you, or this place, or what you gave me. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind sighing through the trees outside. Lena studied him carefully, clean lines of his jaw, the way his eyes no longer darted with confusion but glowed with determination. He wasn't the man she'd found dying in the snow. Not anymore. Then go, she said finally. But don't come back unless you remember what it means to have nothing but your word. Noah didn't answer with more words. He simply reached into the coat he'd been wearing since she dragged him from the forest and pulled something from the inner pocket. It was a small silver compass, worn around the edges, engraved with his initials, NB. He held it out to her. This used to guide me in the city. Now it reminds me of you, of what matters. Lena took it, fingers brushing against his. And what does it point to now? He smiled softly. Home. She didn't trust the word, not fully, not yet. But the look in his eyes told her that he meant it, that maybe against all odds he had changed. The next morning, before the sun had crested the ridge, Noah was gone. He left behind the journal, full of scribbled plans and broken truths, and a note, written in the margins of the last page. It read, I'm not going back to claim power. I'm going back to reclaim myself. And when I do, I'll find my way back to you. Lena folded the journal shut and placed it carefully on the shelf beside the compass. Then she stepped outside, into the quiet snow, and watched the trail he had taken until it vanished into the trees. The following weeks passed slowly. She buried herself in tasks, mending traps, chopping wood, hauling water. But her mind often drifted to him, to Noah, walking back into a world that had tried to kill him, to the way he had looked at her before he left, not as someone he owed, but as someone who had become part of his story. She didn't tell herself lies. She didn't wait by the door. But every morning when she passed by the windows, she found her eyes scanning the horizon. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Noah stood once again before the towering glass skyscraper that bore the name he had spent half his life building. Blackridge Holdings, a monument to ambition, to deals made in rooms without windows, to power traded like currency. But this time, he wasn't walking in as a man chasing influence. He was walking in as a man who had learned what mattered when all the titles were stripped away. Inside, the faces turned to him in shock. Gasps, murmurs. He had been declared missing, presumed dead, replaced. And now here he was, standing in the center of the storm he had once commanded, but with a fire in his chest that hadn't come from profit margins or press releases. It had come from the edge of death, from a cabin in the woods, from a woman who had asked for nothing and in doing so had given him everything. He walked into the boardroom with no need for introductions, eyes locked on Claire, who sat in his old chair as if it had always been hers. She rose slowly. Noah, you're alive. He said nothing, just dropped a single folder onto the table, proof of the forged signatures, financial trails, audio recordings, confessions Jonathan had made under pressure. Claire paled. I'm not here to take back everything, he said calmly. Just the part of me you couldn't steal. And with that he turned and walked out, past the glass walls, past the gold plaques, past the city that had once owned him. He walked straight toward the airport, toward the place where he'd first remembered what it felt like to be human, toward the woman who had saved him from the snow, toward home. The first thing Lena noticed as she stepped out of the airport was the sound. New York hummed. It roared. It pulsed through the streets like blood through veins. The sharp scent of exhaust mixed with roasted chestnuts from a vendor's cart. Neon lights blinked against a sky too clouded to show stars. Cars honked. Pedestrians brushed past without eye contact, conversations fractured and urgent. It was nothing like the mountains. She had hesitated before boarding the plane. The envelope Noah had sent with the driver felt heavy in her coat pocket. It hadn't contained flowery promises or poetic confessions, just a plain ticket, the small silver compass she'd returned to him, and a folded scrap of paper with 5 handwritten words. "If you come, I'll be waiting." She didn't know what she expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But when the black car pulled up to the curb outside a towering glass building downtown, and the doorman tipped his cap and opened her door, something in her chest clenched. This world was not hers. A woman with clipped heels and a designer coat led her through the marble-floored lobby, past polished elevators and walls of shimmering gold. Lena caught her reflection in the glass. Wind-blown hair, work boots, and a canvas jacket still dusted with the memory of mountain snow. She looked wildly out of place. The elevator opened to the penthouse. Noah was standing by the windows, his back to her, hands in his pockets, overlooking the city. He didn't turn immediately. Perhaps he had known it was her the moment the doors opened. When he did turn, he smiled. Softly, not broadly, as if smiling too much might shatter the moment. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice, but also something else. Fear, maybe. Hope held gently, like it might bruise if held. Too tightly. "I wasn't sure I would," Lena admitted, stepping into the room. Noah walked forward, closing the distance slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement might send her running. "I didn't bring you here to impress you," he said. "I just wanted you to see all of it. The world I left behind. The man I was." Lena took in the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A wall of books. Art that probably cost more than her. Entire cabin. But the room felt cold despite its beauty, like something curated more than lived in. "It's beautiful," she said. "But it's not real." Noah nodded, not offended. "That's exactly what I needed you to see." Over the next 2 days, he showed her everything. Not the restaurants or the luxury, but the truths. He took her to the Blackridge office. Not to flaunt his status, but to show her what had happened since his return. He had fired Jonathan Reed, pressed charges, liquidated a large portion of his stake. Most surprising of all, he had stepped down as CEO. Publicly. Voluntarily. "I built this place for the wrong reasons," he told her as they walked through the office's echoing halls. "To prove something. To be someone. But power without purpose is just weight. It crushes you." He had created something new. The Heart Initiative. Named not in ownership but in honor. A non-profit that now provided resources to forgotten communities. Schools in northern Alaska. Mobile clinics, sustainable. Power to small villages. "I'm not trying to play the hero," he said. "I'm trying to make something good out of the man I used to be." Later, as they walked through Central Park beneath budding trees, he asked her quietly, "Do you believe people can really change?" Lena didn't answer right away. She looked up at the buildings towering around them. "Change isn't the hard part," she said. "The hard part is staying changed when no one's watching." Noah stopped walking. "Then I guess you'll have to watch me." That night they sat on the rooftop of the penthouse. The city glittered beneath them, alive in 1,000 directions. Lena sipped tea while Noah stared into the night like he was trying to see something past the lights. "I thought I'd feel proud," he said, taking it all back, proving they couldn't kill me. "And do you?" He shook his head. "I just feel untired, like I've spent so long building the wrong kind of life, and now I don't know how to live the right one." Lena studied him. The sharp edges he once wore like armor were dull now. His voice no longer carried the weight of authority, but of humility. He wasn't performing. He was just being. "You know," she said after a long silence, "there's a place where no one cares who you were." "I remember," he replied. "I think about it every morning I wake up here." When she said nothing, he turned to her. "I love you, Lena." Her breath caught. She looked at him, at the vulnerability he had learned to wear without shame. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the compass once more. "I don't care about this world anymore. Not like I used to. I don't want to win in it. I want to be part of something that matters. With you." She held his gaze. "Words are easy." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm not asking you to believe them." He pressed the compass into her hand again. "I'm asking you to test them." The next morning, Lena was gone. She didn't leave a note. She didn't need to. Noah knew what she was asking. If he truly meant what he said, he would find his way back. Not by jet or private car, but by heart, by action, by transformation. Weeks passed, then months. Noah did. Not return to the penthouse. He sold it. He left the city behind. Not with grand gestures or headlines, but in silence. He traveled to the northern villages. He worked with his own hands. He sat in cold, drafty cabins and listened more than he spoke. He showed up. And one day, as Lena stood by the frozen riverbank near her cabin, splitting kindling beneath a violet sky, she heard footsteps. She didn't turn right away. When she did, he was standing there, dressed in wool and leather, a little thinner, a little rougher, but undeniably changed. "I still can't chop wood without bruising my ego," he said. Lena dropped the hatchet and walked toward him slowly. "I told you," she said, voice steady. "Don't come back unless you mean to stay." "I'm not going anywhere." And then, for the first time in either of their lives, everything finally felt still, not stuck, not lost, just still enough to be real. The river thawed slowly in April, its surface cracking open like a secret, revealing itself one breath at a time. Ice fractured in wide sheets, drifting downstream between banks still laced with snow. Above, the skies shifted from the bruised grey of winter to the hesitant blue of early spring. Life, long dormant, stirred again, birds returning, pine needles shining brighter beneath new light, the earth waking from its long frozen silence. In the cabin by the edge of the forest, the days had taken on a rhythm, the kind of rhythm that didn't require explanation or ceremony. Lena rose early to tend to the greenhouse she had started with Noah's help. He was usually already outside by then, splitting logs with patient focus, no longer fumbling or grunting with frustration. His hands had grown calloused, his movements had changed, slower, more grounded, as if the land had taught him how to move with it instead of against it. It had been nearly a year since he came back, not in a private jet or with a dramatic speech, but with a single backpack slung over his shoulder and a quiet certainty in his eyes. He had come back the way a man returns to what he loves most, humbly, reverently, and without expectation. At first, Lena hadn't said much. She watched. She waited. Because promises mean little when they're made with flowers and soft words. They mean everything when made in silence and kept through action. Noah kept his. Every day he showed up, not just for her but for the land, the people in the nearby village, and for himself. Together, they rebuilt. Not just the cabin, which now had stronger walls and solar panels that powered a modest string of lights. Not just the community center, where Noah offered weekly lessons on practical finance and remote entrepreneurship. They rebuilt something harder, more invisible, a sense of trust, a shared life that felt stitched together not by rescue or gratitude, but by understanding. One evening, as dusk fell and the fire inside the cabin cast soft light against the wooden walls, Noah sat at the small table, carving something out of a block of cedar. His hair had grown longer, streaked at the ends with sun and wind. He was whittling slowly, with the kind of focus that only came from peace. Lena, curled in the armchair by the fireplace with a book in her lap, glanced up and asked, "What are you making?" He looked over, not quite smiling, but close. "It's a box." She raised an eyebrow. "A box for what?" He didn't answer immediately, just kept carving, smoothing the wood. "You'll see." Days passed and the box remained unfinished. Noah would work on it in the mornings or late at night, always with the same quiet devotion. Lena didn't ask again. She had learned that some things take time to become what they're meant to be. One clear afternoon, they sat by the riverbank, watching the slow drift of water over stones. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. Lena skipped a stone and it danced 3 times before vanishing. "Do you miss it?" she asked suddenly. Noah didn't pretend to misunderstand. He shook his head slowly. "Not even a little." "No part of it?" she asked again. "Not the power, the status?" He pulled his knees closer and looked out across the water. "I used to think I needed all of that to matter, that if I wasn't building something bigger, I was wasting my time. But it turns out what I was building was a wall, around myself, around everything I thought I needed to protect. And now?" "Now," he said, turning to her, "I wake up beside someone who doesn't need anything from me except the truth. And every day I try to be more honest than I was the day before. That's more than I ever had in that world." Lena held his gaze, searching for the old man she once found in the snow, barely breathing, full of shadows and forgotten promises. He was gone. Not erased, but transformed. And she had changed too. She no longer saw herself as the girl who merely survived. She had become someone who chose her life every day, with purpose, with clarity. That evening, Noah presented her with the box. It was simple, carved from cedar, sanded until it was smooth. But the lid was inlaid with a familiar symbol, a compass, and around its edges, etched in careful lines, were the coordinates of the cabin they had made into a home. Inside, nestled in a soft cloth, was a ring, not gold, not diamond-studded, just silver, shaped into a band marked with a delicate engraving of pine trees and a mountain ridge. Lena looked up at him, her throat tightening. "I'm not asking for a ceremony," he said. "I'm not even asking for a yes. I'm asking if I can spend my life waking up beside you, building this, whatever this is, for as long as you'll let me." She closed the box gently and set it aside. Then she stepped closer, took his face in her hands and said, "You already are." They didn't need a vow. They had already been making one every day, in every shared meal, every chore done side by side, every moment of silence that never asked to be filled. That spring, the Heart Initiative expanded, not into cities or boardrooms, but into forgotten towns where children walked miles for clean water, where teachers worked without supplies. Noah became not a leader in the traditional sense, but a listener, a presence. He taught what he had learned, how to invest in people instead of profits, how to see wealth in community, not capital. Lena too taught. She passed on survival skills to women rebuilding lives after hardship. She organized seed exchanges and started a project teaching children how to grow their own food, even in harsh climates. Together, they made something that could last. One evening, much later, a young boy from the village asked Noah what he used to do before he lived in the mountains. "I used to run a company," he said. "Why'd you leave?" Noah smiled. "Because I finally learned what I was supposed to build." "And what's that?" Noah looked across the field, where Lena was laughing with a group of kids, her face lit by the last gold light of the day. "A life," he said. "One that's real." As twilight settled over the land, the old compass, now kept by the cabin door, glinted in the light. It no longer needed to point north. Its job was done. It had led two people not just to each other, but to themselves. And, in the quiet hush of the wild beneath the endless sky, they had found something no city could offer. Not perfection, not safety, but home. One morning, as the sun rose behind the pines and steam curled from Lena's mug of tea, Noah returned from town with an envelope in his hand. He looked pale, unsettled in a way she hadn't seen since the early days. Without speaking, he handed it to her. Inside was a legal summons. Claire Montrose, his former business rival, had filed a civil suit accusing him of breaching a non-compete clause, seeking damages that could bankrupt the Heart Initiative before it truly bloomed. Lena read the words twice, her fingers tightening. "This is about revenge," Noah said quietly. "She doesn't care about the company. She wants to destroy anything I've built without her." Lena stared at him. "So what are you going to do?" His silence was telling. This was no longer a fight for corporate survival. It was personal. And for the first time, Noah hesitated. Not out of fear for himself, but for what his past might cost the life they were building together. "You always said change is only real if it lasts when no one's watching," Lena said. "So let's see if it can last when someone's trying to tear it down." Noah exhaled, eyes clear again. "Then we fight. Together." And just like that, the next chapter began. Not one of escape, but of confrontation, of legacy, of proving that real transformation isn't about walking away. It's about standing your ground when it matters most. If this twist made your heart race, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more powerful stories about love, resilience, and the unexpected turns that change everything. See you in the next chapter.